Hi everyone, and welcome to There's No Such Thing as Normal, a podcast about neurodiversity, disability and mental health. I'm Lou, your host, and I'm neurodivergent myself, and I'm also completely blind. So I'm very excited because this is episode 2 of the Neurodiversity and Education podcast series. And if you missed episode 1, definitely go and check that out, where I just talked a bit about the series in general and what to expect. But in today's episode, we're going to be talking about noise sensitivity in schools. So the challenges that we can face as neurodivergent people, but also the solutions and things that really help. And I'll also be sharing my own personal experience, and Maria will be sharing hers. Speaking of Maria, once again joined by the amazing Maria.
Hello everybody. Hi Lou, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm very happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you are welcome. So I think a good place to start is explaining why it's important that sensory processing challenges and differences are met in schools. So I think we'll both have some interesting perspective on this. But basically, from my point of view, as an autistic person that was in mainstream school, mainstream secondary, I'm now at a specialist college, but mainstream secondary, oh my God. I mean, yeah, it's complete chaos, and the sensory environment is hell, and it's not meant for us autistic neurodivergent people. It's just super overwhelming, unsettling, chaotic, unsafe. It just doesn't feel good, basically. And I believe that everyone should feel safe and happy at school, and also not have to go to an environment that doesn't meet their needs and where they feel overwhelmed, because as a human right, I think we all deserve to feel safe and comfortable and happy, and to have a positive education experience. So by meeting people's sensory needs, you're doing the basics of keeping people safe from harm. And when I say harm, I literally mean the torture of being in an environment that's just not suitable, is just really damaging. You know, it causes a lot of high anxiety and distress and burnout, and you know, can't concentrate, can't reach your potential because it's just overwhelming. And you know, you can feel isolated, and you know, even leads to things like school refusal. So I just think that it's important to meet sensory needs, because everyone deserves to feel safe and to have a positive experience. Also, students will learn more and feel happier as well, lower rates of mental health. Anyway, how about you, Maria? Why do you think it's important?
Yeah, I think I really echo what you said, and of course have a different perspective on it as a teacher. Sensory needs are super important to be met in education. Otherwise, you really can see students not be comfortable. I think that it has a really mental impact, but also physical impact on a lot of students, especially neurodivergent people, like Lou said. I think the reason why we were focusing on noise is that we both agree, I think, that noise can be particularly challenging, especially in a large mainstream secondary school. You know, from my experience, it's being a music teacher can be challenging, trying to create that environment that's inclusive but caters to everyone's needs in terms of noise being managed. And then also just things like school corridors, and we'll get into that a bit, but that could be really difficult.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, lunch halls, all of these kind of environments can just be so overwhelming for students and probably staff too, to be honest. It is a really, really important thing to consider.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe we could start, I'll say a little bit about my experience.
Yeah, that would be really good.
I won't ramble on for too long. But basically, I was in, as I said, mainstream secondary. And for me, noise was the biggest challenge. I really struggled with noise. And yeah, it was extremely difficult. So I unfortunately had a one-to-one support person to start with at secondary who basically didn't understand, and I was having to put up with comments like, it's not that loud in here. You need to man up a bit. I mean, you don't say that to how old was I? 11, 12, 13, 14. You don't say it to anybody. It doesn't matter whether they're 11 or 111. You don't say it to anybody. You don't tell people to man up. There's 101 reasons why not. And I'm not even going to go into that because it should be pretty obvious why you don't say that.
Hopefully,
so,
yeah.
If it's not obvious, then I'm concerned. But okay, so that was it. And also, things like, the world's noisy, you got to get used to it. Right. Just please, no, none of these comments. So the first step is, understanding is vital. And actually just empathy, it's basic human empathy. It's not that difficult. You've just got to imagine how hard it is for that person and just try and support them rather than these comments which aren't helpful. Anyway, I basically lived with my hands over my ears, which wasn't really much fun, especially when I was stuck with this person who was just telling me it wasn't that loud. Had a massive impact on my mental health. I was crying a lot, probably like most days. I was just very traumatic, really, being in that environment. So, of course, then as a result, I was very isolated because I couldn't cope with it. I was always sort of hiding out in the support room, and I was basically in a little room by myself. A lot of like breaks and lunches until I did make friends in the support room. But we're going to do another episode on the social side of things. But yeah, it was very isolating because I couldn't really cope with the environment. I was always just like hidden away, and I don't think that's really healthy because, being where I am now in such a supportive environment at this lovely specialist college, I just feel like I'm part of the community rather than just being somebody who's always overstimulated and hiding away, which isn't really safe and isn't really, healthy for a person to have to do. So yeah, it was really challenging being in that sort of situation. And because I was with somebody who didn't really understand me, I then couldn't communicate how I was feeling. I felt like I was constantly just like not being understood and couldn't express myself. I felt unsafe, and it affected my trust because to be honest, I was at a point where I just thought, oh, well, this is how it is then. People don't understand. When you're young, especially, this is a really, really good point. When you're young, I would have been, 11, 12, up to sort of 11 to 15-ish. I don't know, 11 to 14. Anyway, when you're young, that's when you're developing trust, you're developing, relationships with people, learning about the world and social interactions and things like that. And I think it's really important that if you're being supported, that they understand you, because if they don't, then, you actually then believe that that's how the world is and that people don't understand you if you get that from quite a young age. And I do think that's quite damaging. And thankfully, I've since that experience had much better support, so my trust in people has increased, but it still had an impact on me for sure. So yeah, it was hard because I basically didn't know what to do, and I didn't feel that the environment was great, and we tried to move schools and that was a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, I think that in the end, once I got some different support and other people that were helping me more and understood, it was a lot better. And also noise cancelling headphones are basically the biggest thing, and having a quiet, safe place to go, being able to leave lessons early, things like that. But yeah, that's really enough rambling from me.
I think that stuff is really, really helpful to know. And the things like the noise cancelling headphones, what a life changer they are.
Yeah. I couldn't live without them now.
Absolutely. Perhaps I could go on to talk about some sensory challenges within the classroom. So when myself and Lou were talking about this beforehand, we were talking about issues of chatting, chairs scraping, just general kind of noise in the classroom can be super overwhelming for some people. And as a teacher, it also can be really hard to manage, because obviously you want your students to be able to talk to each other. You want your students to be able to share ideas, everything like that. And if you've got 30 students all trying to talk at the same time, or in my case, all playing music at the same time, it can be really difficult to balance that kind of need for creativity, need for, being able to express themselves with the overwhelmingness of kind of noise. And that can be a big challenge. So I guess in terms of solutions, or some things that I found helped, things like acoustics is really, really important. Do you have carpet in the room? Do you have any soundproofing? Things like considering the space. So ideally, all schools, especially music areas, should have breakout spaces where therefore you can have smaller groups go into the rooms and work together. They can create music together but not be overwhelmed by the whole class. That makes a huge difference. Also, keyboards with headphones, electronic instruments, being able to have students be able to listen to their own music and be able to play on the keyboard, that helps with the noise. And one of my big bugbearers is allowing students to wear noise cancelling headphones or to be able to listen to their own music whilst working. I think that it's really important that we're preparing students for the workplace, and in the workplace most people listen to music or have some kind of background noise happening, and if a student is able to work more successfully by having some calming music into their ears in order to help with the noise sensitivity, then why are we not allowing students to do that? I think that that's a really important need. It's just about managing expectations around that. Like, okay, use your phone to put the music on, but then the phone needs to go away and, you don't see it again. So things like that can be really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that headphone thing with music, because for me, if I'm working, I'll always, doing any sort of college work or anything, focusing, I will always have some sort of music, because again, everyone's needs are different. Some people might just want to work in silence, in which case, they could wear earplugs or headphones or anything. But then if you want music, then allowing it, because as you say, it really is preparing for the workplace, and that's what you're allowed to do in the wide world when you're doing anything, whatever it is. So it's just about letting people do what meets their needs, rather than just sort of being controlling and no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, because how's that helpful?
Yeah, I think kind of thinking through the rules that you have in the classroom and thinking, well, what is the reason for that? Can I actually explain to the students why that rule is in place and why it's fair? And if you can't, then, well, maybe you shouldn't have that rule,
Yeah.
And it is about listening to them. Like Lou said, we can't emphasize enough how important empathy is, and just taking the time to speak to students. If you have a student that seems really distressed, taking the time outside a lesson to find out what the reason is, and then doing what you can to accommodate for that is really important, whether they're neurodivergent or not. Like, this is I think noise sensitivity especially is something that can affect so many people. So really just taking the time to get to know all of their needs and all of their triggers as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then how about this whole thing around, explaining to students that fairness means different people need different accommodations, and everyone has different needs, because again, I guess if one student's allowed to do something, then the others might go, oh, well, I want that, and that can cause issues as well. What's your experience as a teacher with that?
So yeah, fairness, it's a tricky one. I think it's always really difficult to get right, but I also think that it's a really important life skill to learn, that equality is not the same as equity, and actually that to be fair means for some people they're going to have different things than others. And so I would try to just be really open and honest, speak to students about that, to try to explain why some students need certain things over other students. I think that's just really important for students to learn, really.
Yeah, 100%. I think, as you say, in the world, everyone needs different things, not just in school. Everywhere you go, there's going to be different people needing different things. And it just does come down to that whole thing around diversity. Everyone's different, and not everyone should be treated. I mean, I'm not saying, people shouldn't be treated differently. It's more just that the support people need varies. And if people no two people are going to need the same support or learn in the same way or I just think it's really important that, everyone needs to be treated with the same respect and the same kindness. But in terms of accommodations, of course, it's going to be different.
Yeah, definitely. But it can be really challenging as a teacher, for sure, because you want all your students to think you're treating them fair. But and on that note, I guess in terms of accommodations, seating is also a really important one, kind of where students are sat. Obviously, if they do have sensory needs, especially with noise sensitivity, where you're sat in a room can have a really big impact on noise and how you're registering the noise around you. So it sounds like a really simple one, but just really carefully considering seating and allowing students to feed back to you about whether their seating choice is good for them or not.
Definitely. And I think even down to where in the class you're sitting, because again, if you're right by the door, there's going to be constant noise of the door opening, closing, then the sounds from the corridors. So that's probably not going to be ideal. But on the other hand, maybe being next to the door is better, so that if you need some time out, you can get out. So again, it's about just talking to each student, seeing what they need, and also not putting people next to noisy people, and thinking about the table layouts as well. So maybe just not putting them in the middle of the room, because again, being in the middle of the room, you're going to have all the noise from the whole classroom. And again, with people, there's no point going next to noisy people if you're someone that needs somewhere quiet. So I think some considerations definitely very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we were going to go on to talk about the dreaded thing in schools, corridors.
Yep, dreaded corridors.
They can be absolute nightmares and crowded, chaotic, can be really a difficult place for students.
For sure. I mean, I think the worst times are definitely between lessons, and then there's also the whole lunchtime thing as well, because I know that where I was, I mean, I certainly didn't do this. I couldn't cope with this. I was always hiding away in my own little room. But a lot of people did just sort of sit around in the corridors at lunchtime and eat their lunch in the corridor. I mean, goodness me, that's just awful. I mean, who'd want to do that anyway? But they're just chaotic. So, yeah. And between lessons, everyone probably just goes a bit wild because they need to burn off steam. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be really tricky, and it can be tricky to manage as teachers as well. I've worked in a couple of different settings I've worked in one setting where we made sure our corridors were silent. And the idea behind it was to create this calm atmosphere, to prevent bullying, to create this feeling between lessons of calmness and kind of just walking to your next lesson with purpose. But of course, that was really difficult to manage as teachers, to have to enforce it. And it could become quite stressful, both for students and staff, because, some students just really, like you said, Lou, need to just let out some energy between lessons, actually. Yeah. That's not necessarily a good solution, but actually the good thing that happened in that school because of that was that there was a lot of staff in the corridors at all times, and that meant that students felt supported. It meant that staff were there in case anything did happen, and I think that that's a really important thing, staff presence. But obviously, of course, that again adds to the problem of teacher workload. So it's just making sure that you think really carefully about your staffing and when the best time to use them are and who the best person to put where is, so that you support that.
100%. Definitely. Yeah, I can see how quiet corridors seem like a good idea, but in practice, it's a lot to enforce and a lot to do. So maybe it is just a case of having more staff, but also the most vital thing is letting those who need to leave 5 minutes early from lesson. So basically, this is a very common accommodation for anyone who's maybe autistic and would struggle with the noise and the crowds, but also people who are blind, because, trying to navigate, trying to use a cane, I mean, it's near enough impossible to do that when it's busy. And actually, the one-to-one, the support person I mentioned earlier, who was saying all these things, was also just really resisting of any accommodations. It was like, let's leave 5 minutes early. But then, they would be like, let's just leave I don't know, 2 lessons a week early or 3 lessons a week early. But what is the point? It needs to be consistent. It's like saying to somebody who wears hearing aids, oh, you're only allowed to wear your hearing aids for 2 lessons. It's like, it's not, it's one of those accommodations that is non-negotiable, and it doesn't make any sense to make it a once in a while thing. And it was extremely awkward for me because this person was then like there were many issues, but the first one was that the person wasn't letting me leave early, and I'd be standing up and getting ready, and then they'd be like, oh, Lou, what are you doing? And I'm like, in my head, I'm going, well, I'm getting ready to leave early because this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But then I couldn't really at that point stand up for myself, and I wasn't great at doing that. I mean, what do you expect? I was only young and autistic and under extreme pressures and stress, and it was really awful. And actually, I couldn't really stand up for myself. In my head, I was going, well, I'm leaving early because that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was a real battle. I mean, it led to a lot of meltdowns as well. I was basically constantly overstimulated getting to lessons, not really being able to learn. I mean, I don't really remember learning a lot in my first few years of secondary, in all honesty. It's all just a blur of stress, and that isn't okay. I was always overstimulated, often having meltdowns. I mean, how is that even productive, and how is it even safe and safeguarding mental health? I mean, this is a huge issue, who's safeguarding mental health in schools, but again, another whole topic. Yeah, leaving, I did eventually get it. We eventually got there. But the point is, it's non-negotiable. If somebody is noise sensitive, blind, or has any other disability that means that corridors are overwhelming, they need to be leaving early, and it shouldn't be a once in a while thing, because that is just ridiculous. It needs to be every time, because otherwise it's just going to cause trauma and it's pointless.
Really well put, Lou, and thanks for sharing your experiences, because I know, it can be a bit traumatic.
It is very, but somebody's got to talk about it, because something's got to change.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really important as well that staff remember that the students that need this, they do actually need it. It's not something they want. It's not a behaviour choice. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm trying to get out of lessons early. It's actually, I need to be out of lessons early. And it goes back to that equality and equity thing, and explaining and making sure that other students know that actually, they don't need to leave early, and therefore they don't, because I don't know. Because I know it can also become tricky as a teacher when you've got some students able to leave early and others aren't. But of course, it's just explaining that and learning that life lesson, really, really important.
Of course. And also, I think that a point to make is by the last 5 minutes of the lesson, most of the time it's sort of just packing up, tidying up and finishing anyway. So I get that I think with me, I think they were, at times worried, oh, we don't want you missing lesson. But okay, it's probably better that I missed that last 5 minutes of tidying up or whatever it was, or that anyone does, misses the last 5 minutes and then gets to the lesson calm and regulated, rather than turning up in a state and just being really stressed. Like, it's just one of those things that you have to weigh up the pros and cons, and the pros of leaving earlier bigger than any of the cons of missing information. And anyway, if information is that important, it should be emailed out. Any sort of homework or anything or announcements should be being emailed, and teachers shouldn't really expect people to just remember information at the very last second of a lesson anyway, because people are always just distracted and wandering off. So
yeah, really important.
Definitely.
Well, I think those are our main points about noise sensitivity, aren't they?
For sure. I think it all comes down to empathy, understanding, and compassion. Understanding that people have different sensory needs, and just because you might not find an environment loud, that doesn't mean that another person won't. And also maybe just having training on this sort of thing. I know it does happen in a lot of places. I mean, here, I know there's a lot of training that goes on because it's a specialist college, so it is different. And I get that, training takes money and time, but it's just, even just staff taking time out to learn more about this sort of thing, or just understanding from our perspective how hard it is. But also, really importantly, this whole thing doesn't need to be complicated. It's the smallest allowances that often make the big difference. Leaving early, wearing headphones, adjusting seating, in music rooms, having keyboards, having breakout rooms, putting padding on the walls, making sure rooms are carpeted, having more teachers in the corridors. I mean, this isn't rocket science. It is just, again, providing safe sensory spaces as well, having a place where people can go if they feel overwhelmed. I mean, okay, I know it's all good and well me saying, oh, well, we have that all here. I know that there's only like 30 students here, so it's a lot easier than if there's like 2,500 or 1,000 or however many. But at the end of the day, schools are there to provide education and to look after the well-being of their students. I think that's really important. It's not just about, you're educating people, but in order to educate them, you need to support them and meet their needs. Otherwise, they're not going to be educated. So if you want to educate young people, make sure that they feel safe and supported, and that will work a lot better.
Wow, very well summarised. Thanks, Lou. I don't think I have anything else to offer there.
No.
Yeah.
I think that's us done. But I think next time
Tune in next time.
Yeah, next time we're going to cover all the other sensory needs in schools. So we'll look at the other senses like lighting maybe, or tactile sensitivities, use of fidgets, maybe the need for movement, lots of different other sensory needs, because noise sensitivity was such a long one. We just did that. So next time, expect all the other senses and lots of great tips and insights. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Can't wait for the next time.
Yay. Goodbye.
Bye.